All right, we are back. Welcome, everyone. Um, whether you're listening to this as the full podcast, and if you're listening to this as its own video, welcome. Um, this is going to be a new thing we're doing on the show. We announced it on the full episode. If you probably already heard it if you're listening to the full episode, but we're gonna chop this show up into its own segments. And this segment will be, as you read in the title, the NBA trade deadline analysis segment. So, um, without further ado, let's just get right into it. We have a lot of really amazing trades to cover. This was a great deadline.
It was. The first deadline I want to get into is the Miami Heat trade for Victor Oladipo. So let's start with that. Let's get your thoughts first. First, I'll give everyone the trade details, and then I'll let you speak on it, and then I'll give you my thoughts. So the Heat get Victor Oladipo from the Rockets, and in return, the Rockets get Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and 2022 first round pick swap. I think that's what it
Yes,
says here.
yeah, right to swap.
Um, yes. So I'll let you give your thoughts on both sides, and then I'll give some of my thoughts.
Well, I'll start out with the Heat here. Getting Victor Oladipo. This is a high upside uh, uh, get for them. I mean, obviously Victor Oladipo, as we know, is capable of being one of the best shooting guards in the entire league. But uh, with that being said, we still don't know if he can get back to that level. He played solid in Houston, but obviously he's not going to get as many touches in Miami with the guards they already have in there in that system. So it'll be interesting to see how efficient he can be with a little bit less touches. But overall, this is a really good move for Miami. I think with the position they were in, they wanted to add more punch. And Oladipo can definitely still provide that, whether you believe he's as good as he is, as good as he was before the injury, is um, a topic of discussion for sure. But uh, even if he isn't, he's still a very solid player. And then for the Rockets, a lot of people were really just tearing into the Rockets for this trade. Like they got fleeced, they got nothing for Oladipo. Uh, they got absolutely nothing. And for me, um, I think just this just shows um, how like hesitant these teams were towards Victor Oladipo. I think there was a lot of hesitation towards him, given that uh, in his time in Houston, sure he put up 20 points and he was pretty good, but he only had like three dunks the whole time he was there, which is very un Victor Oladipo like. He's a guy who thrives on attacking the basket and just um, using his athleticism to just dominate the game. So um, with all the hesitation from these teams, I think this is probably the best offer they could have gotten. Um, I think the other option would have been to just keep him and then just lose him. So it is what it is. If you're Houston, you gotta pick, and you know you gotta get whatever you can get. And I mean, with the situation they were in, I think it's okay.
Yeah, I really like this trade for the Miami Heat. From a Miami Heat perspective, they get Victor Oladipo. Now, he had a severe injury, a quadriceps tendon rupture, I believe, that sidelined him for over a year. And he's had a disjointed return with COVID and everything. And it's really difficult for people that don't watch a ton of NBA or a ton of his games to know what he is at this point because he hasn't played a whole lot. He's played just 48 games in the 14 months since his return. That's barely over half a season. So it's really hard to know what his game is at this point. But it's worth noting that the last time he was fully healthy, up until this point, he did win the Most Improved Player award in the 2017-2018 season, and he was voted to the All NBA third team. So two very prestigious honors right there. And we know that he can be a very good player when he's healthy because we've seen flashes of it. That season was the only season, though, where he had a true shooting percentage. And I know this is getting to sort of more advanced analytics. And if you're not into that, fine. But it was the only season where he had a true shooting percentage better than league average. But I think that comes with the fact that he's sort of he's a volume scorer. So he has the ball in his hands a lot, and he takes a lot of shots, high shot volume. So, I wouldn't read too much into that, but it's just a fact. So yeah, ever since that season, he's been a volume scorer, as I said, and his true shooting percentage is about 10% worse than league average. It's just some statistics on ESPN. I think this does improve the Miami Heat team, given that they didn't have to give much up at all in order to get him. Now there were the Kyle Lowry rumors to Miami, but obviously Masai Ujiri, a top 5 general manager in the league, decided to hold on to him. Didn't really get an offer that I guess, pushed him to trade Lowry. So the next best option, I guess, for Miami was to get Oladipo. And if you look at their team, they're going to get Oladipo. They have Jimmy Butler, and they have Bam Adebayo on the inside. That's a really good trio right there. They upgraded on the offensive side of the ball for sure, given that they get a volume score. And I think it's going to work out because I believe they're the front runners to sign a big man in the buyout market. And I think the front runner is LaMarcus Aldridge. They're the front runner to sign him, as he was just bought out by the San Antonio Spurs yesterday. So if they get him in the mix, a veteran big that can maybe start or come off the bench and give you, he can still do it. So I think they did a really good job here in upgrading their team. And for the Rockets, as you said, many people are crushing them right now because they didn't get really any assets back that can help them right now. But if you think about it, it's not as bad as you think, because both Olynyk and Bradley, they're on expiring deals. Bradley has a team option for next year, but if Houston doesn't want to exercise that, they can just let him go, and they get more. They'll at least have some more cap flexibility, which will be badly needed. They still have the John Wall contract, which isn't great, but you have to have those bad contracts. Sometimes that's just how it works. So for Houston, I don't think it's as bad as people think, because they do get the pick swap, and they do have some draft assets that they can use. But I don't know. They're clearly in a rebuilding stage. They didn't really get any young assets for now, but I think in the future it'll start to look a little better for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And before we move on, I just want to say that the Heat also got Nemanja Bjelica from the Kings in a trade. So
that's true.
He's going to fill that 4 spot. So that gives them the ability to move Tyler Hero to the bench, and they can run some different lineups there. And I think it'll be really interesting to see whether they keep Kendrick Nunn or Goran Dragic in the starting lineup, or whether they just start Jimmy Butler at point guard, because I think he can actually play some point guard. He's a very, very good playmaker. He's really underrated in that aspect. So that'll be interesting to see, because that would be a really interesting lineup. You would have Jimmy Butler at the 1, Victor Oladipo at the 2, and then at the 3, I guess that would be Hero. at the three. And then for Bjelica and Bam Adebayo. That's a lineup with one really good spacing and also defensive versatility as well. So
Right. Okay,
they're a
well,
fun team.
I want to transition to another Eastern Conference favorite. We'll stay in the East and we'll talk
Mhm.
about the Sixers
Okay.
acquisition of George Hill. So I'll lay out the deal and then I'll let you give your thoughts and my thoughts as well. So the 76ers get George Hill from the Thunder and also Ignas Brazdeikis. I don't know how to say his name, but he played at Michigan in college. I remember, I recognize his name. The Thunder get Tony Bradley, Austin Rivers, and 2 future second round picks. And then the Knicks got involved. They get Terrence Ferguson, Vincent Poirier, and a 2021 second round pick. So it's a 3-team deal. So I'll let you give your thoughts on mainly the Sixers getting George Hill. And if you want, you can get into the Thunder's return in the Knicks.
Yeah, I'll touch on the Thunder and the Knicks first, real quick. Obviously, the Thunder, they're getting more picks. They now have a bajillion and 2 picks, whatever you want to whatever you want to call it. They have a million picks for these next what's somewhat years, like 5 or so years. Um, and then the Knicks, they get Terrence Ferguson, a young wing player. That he's the headliner of that deal. That's I think that's a win for them. And then the Sixers, obviously, the headliner of this deal, the only contender in the deal. They get George Hill, who I think has some left in the tank. He's not what he used to be. But I think he still provides value to this team because of the skills as a shooter and just as a solid defender. I don't think he's going to be in the ball handling role all that much, but what this deal gives them the opportunity to do is something that I've been asking the Sixers to do for a long time now: is use Ben Simmons in the short roll, a lot like what the Warriors do with Draymond Green. Get Ben Simmons setting a screen, get him on the short roll, and get him in that high post area to either make a play as a passer, and obviously he's an incredible passer, or get to the basket and make a play in that way. So if they use George Hill to run that type of offense, I think this could be a bigger move than a lot of people give it credit for.
Yeah. I'll start with Philadelphia. I really like this move for Philly. He's not Kyle Lowry, but they do get the best point guard that was moved at the deadline, in George Hill. I think his combination of shooting ability, as you mentioned, he has the size to play either guard position, so some positional flexibility as well, and he has playoff experience, and he's on a reasonable contract, only making about $9.6 million a season, so it's not a huge salary. A veteran player, playoff experience, shooting ability, defense, size to play either position you want him to play. I think he'll help him off the bench. Um, and I think he's going to stabilize the second unit that doesn't have a ton of playmaking. I think that's something that we've been saying Philly has needed for a while now. I think they finally get that. And I think he'll fit in defensively. He's 6'4" with a 6'9" wingspan. He'll fit in defensively because he can play either guard spot, and maybe he can even guard some small forwards. Who knows? But I see him in a roll off the bench, stabilize that second unit offensively, and I think you could see, depending on what the Sixers need in closing situations or close games, whether they need shooting or defense, you could possibly see him in some of those closing lineups in place of either Seth Curry or Danny Green. Who knows? It'll vary depending on the matchup and what the Sixers need. But either way, I think it's a good move. I'd give it like a B plus for the Sixers. And then I'll touch on the Thunder real fast. Um, I think the Thunder did a really good job in this deal as well. They get 2 second-round picks, and they don't really take back any long-term salary. So they acquire more draft capital. They don't get any, bad contracts in return. I don't know how long Austin Rivers is going to last with them. It says here that let's see, where does it? It says this is from ESPN. Rivers probably won't last long with the Thunder. Technically, he's got 2 seasons remaining on the contract because he signed as a free agent with the Knicks last fall. But neither has guaranteed salary. So if Oklahoma City wanted to, they could buy him out now without any long-term consequences. So we'll see what happens with that. And then obviously Tony Bradley, good piece, I guess, to get in the fold for now. But he's also on an expiring deal, I believe. So, he'll get a chance to play when and spell Al Horford some minutes. But he's also a restricted free agent at season's end. I like what the Thunder did. They're obviously in a rebuild as well. They're probably going to end up a lottery team this year due to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's extended absence that was just recently reported. He's out with an injury, but they did what they could. And then for the Knicks, I don't really know. I do like the piece in Terrence Ferguson. He's another young guy they get a look at. And they do get a second-round pick, which I guess is somewhat valuable. But I think it's a relative win for all sides involved.
Right. And I agree with that. So with that, we'll move on. I don't know which trade you wanted to move to next, but from the next one on my list is the Nikola Vucevic trade to the Bulls.
Okay, why don't you start us off?
All right. So Nikola Vucevic was traded to the Bulls along with Al-Farouq Aminu for Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and 2 first-round picks, and one in 2021, one in 2023, and both are top 4 protected. So for the Bulls, I think this is the kind of move every fan hopes their team makes when they're in purgatory. I think a lot of teams spend time romanticizing their picks and like just drooling over what they can get with over the picks. When in reality, a mid round pick is not going to do very good. Because where the Bulls are sitting right now, if they were to just not make this deal and continue on the path that they're on and be like the 9th seed, that's what, like the 13th pick or something like that. So that's not where you want to be. Is my point. So making this deal, you're improving, and you're also, this is an underrated part of the deal. You're also convincing Zach LaVine to stay. He's 26 years old currently, and next year is the final year on his contract. So making this deal now will show him that you're going all in to win. And I think that's what Zach LaVine wants. And I think this will pay off. I think Nikola Vucevic, even though he's 30 years old, I think he still has 4 years of good basketball left. He's a skilled big. He doesn't rely on athleticism. And as long as he stays healthy, I think he can maintain this level of play.
Yeah, I like the deal for the Bulls. I don't think Vucevic is a very good player. He's obviously an all-star. And I like what you said. I think what they're telling Zach LaVine is, okay, we're all in on you right now. We went out. We were aggressive. We got you another all-star caliber player to go along with you, and we're buying into you as our legitimate star. So I like the deal for the Bulls. It's been almost a year since they hired their new president of basketball operations, who has yet to leave a significant mark on this roster, except for the fact that he did draft Patrick Williams with the number 4 overall pick in last year's draft. But I like it. You're getting another all-star, and Vucevic. Vucevic is he's solid. I've watched some of his games. I don't, as I mentioned last podcast, I don't watch a whole lot of Magic games, but when I've watched him, he can score at every level. So I think it'll be good for the Bulls. If you look at, I don't have too many notes. If you look at the Magic's return, I think they did pretty well. I mean, I think Wendell Carter Jr. is a very good player. It's yet to be seen if they'll buy out or keep Otto Porter Jr. But I think for the short term, they're going to keep him and see what happens. He's another good piece to throw in. And then first round picks this year and in 2 years, 2023. I like that return right there. I don't know if you could have done a whole lot better than that. So they obviously acquired more pieces in the Aaron Gordon trade and the Evan Fournier trade. So they're starting over fresh, and they're acquiring a lot of these young assets, and I guess jump starting sort of that rebuild. But I
Right.
like it from both sides again. A lot of these deals I see as sort of good for both sides or mutual or like win-win sort of deals. So um, yeah,
Right. And you hit it right on the head with the Magic. I think they were on the border of whether they wanted to trade Vucevic. A lot of reports came out over these past few weeks on them being like, no, we're not going to trade Vucevic unless we're absolutely blown away. And then that offer obviously came to be with Chicago, and they pulled the trigger. So credit to them. I think this is something they needed to do for a while now. And this is hopefully the start of something better for the Magic in the future. So they're
yeah, they
basically
they're
rebuilding from a rebuild.
they're ripping off that band-aid that they needed to rip off a long while ago.
Right.
So good for them. They're taking steps, and I guess the wrong direction, but the right direction at the same time.
Right.
Okay, so let's just stay with the Magic and talk about the Aaron Gordon deal to Denver, which I'm not going to take credit for it because I did get it off the internet. But that exact deal that we talked about last podcast with R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, and the first round pick go to Denver in return for Aaron Gordon. So let's get your thoughts real fast.
Yeah, that's honestly incredible how you got that exactly right. That's crazy. Um but obviously we covered this trade in the last podcast, and my thoughts remain the same. I think this move is a win for both sides. This for the Magic, obviously. This is a good return. This is a lot more than they got back for Evan Fournier, and we'll get back to that later. Um, that first round pick is the headliner in this deal, and then obviously R.J. Hampton, who with Markel Fultz out, and I think they have Cole Anthony still healthy. I believe I'm not exactly sure on that, but you could throw him in with Cole Anthony for right now and see what he can do. Play him like 30 minutes a game, whatever you need to do, uh, and see what he can do. And then Gary Harris, I feel like he might just be a throw in. I think he might get bought out if he wants to go to a contender. But good deal for the Magic. And then for the Nuggets, um, they improved, but I question whether this will push them over the top. It makes them more of a threat. Don't get me wrong. Um, I think with the way the West is shaking up right now with all the injuries, I think they are in a position to move up a few spots in these next few weeks. So hopefully they'll take advantage of that. But uh, offensively, they're already really solid. And then defensively, I think Aaron Gordon, like I said in the last podcast, will step into that Jeremy Grant role. And I actually looked at his numbers before this episode. And they surprised me, actually. He's shooting career high from 3-point range, and career highs in efficiency as well. So I take back what I said last podcast when I said that he's not that efficient of a player. I think for most of his career he hasn't, but this year he actually has been very solid. So good move for both sides.
Yeah, I'm high on this deal for the Nuggets. Yeah, I don't know if it obviously you can make it. I mean, it's arguable that this doesn't really put them over. That this doesn't thread the needle or put them over the top, um, or put them, I guess, like in that category with the Lakers and that sort of thing. But I like getting back Aaron Gordon. Look, they needed to fill the Jeremy Grant role, whether you think it or not. But what ESPN says here is the narrative that the Nuggets were badly missing Jeremy Grant, who started in last year's playoff run, was misguided. Denver's plus 4.6 point differential is dramatically better than the team's plus 2.1 mark in 2019-2020, and also better than the 2018-2019 team, which had a plus 4 point differential when the Nuggets finished second in the West, but were knocked out in the second round of the playoffs. The difference this year has entirely been a product of Denver struggling in unpredictable close games. They're 6-7 in games decided by 5 or fewer points this year. They went 12-9 in 2019, 2020 in such games, and they were an incredible 19-5 2 years ago. So, that's just what ESPN says. I do think they downplayed it a little bit. I do think they still needed to fill that Jeremy Grant role. He was very important, played a very vital role in last year's team. And they're getting Aaron Gordon, who's an athletic defender, has switchability, and I think it'll be good. Now, this also does give them some lineup versatility. Obviously, you have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. We think that Michael Porter Jr. will be in there as well, but you can fill in that fifth spot with Will Barton, Paul Millsap, JaMychal Green, Aaron Gordon. They have a lot of flexibility now, and I like this team. I think they're starting to hit their stride, and I think Gordon, as you mentioned, career high and 3-point shooting percentage at 37.5%. I think he'll fit nicely. And then the Magic nailed it. They get Gary Harris was to match contracts, and he still provides some value, but we'll see what they want to do with him. RJ Hampton is the real kicker here, a very young, talented point guard that they can keep in their system for a while and develop. And then the first round pick isn't for another 4 years, but it's a valuable asset to have down the line. So, I think both sides benefit in their own sort of ways. For the Nuggets, I'd give it like A minus, and for the Magic, like a B plus A minus. I think it's good for both sides. Once again,
All right, another win-win. So to the next trade here. I think we should do the other Magic trade. They were very busy this trade deadline. This one is Evan Fournier to the Boston Celtics for Jeff Teague and 2 second-round picks. Very interesting deal here. For a first glance, I was like, shouldn't they have gotten a little more for Evan Fournier? But given the fact that he's on an inspiring deal, and I think the Magic just wanted picks to begin with. I think they probably were gunning for a guy like Aaron Nesmith or Romeo Langford, but the Celtics weren't budging, and I don't think any other teams were offering for Evan Fournier. So to stand right by him and not make him have to go through the whole rebuild thing. They just went ahead and let him go and play for a contender, um, and so they can just jumpstart the rebuild. That was one thing that I wanted to add for the Rockets is the fact that they kept Eric Gordon when he's having a really good season, and they didn't unload him. Obviously, you can't unload all of your win now guys like John Wall. He's on a too big of a contract, but Eric Gordon was one of those guys where I thought he could have helped someone on the contending team, and in the Magic's position, it's a similar thing to where you just go ahead and let him go so you can completely start your rebuild. You don't want a lot of guys that aren't going to fit your timeline.
Yeah,
And then go ahead.
It's a interesting deal. I think the Magic, after the Gordon deal and the Vucevic deal, they were just looking to get whatever they could for Evan Fournier, and Boston was obviously looking for another piece to add, another scorer. And Fournier, I was very surprised. He's only I think 28 or 29 years old. And they have some cap flexibility, so I think they can sign him to an extension if they want this offseason. But he's I believe on an expiring deal. And given that, when, as you mentioned last podcast, when Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum aren't on the court, they're pretty bad offensively. But when they are on the court together, they've outscored opponents by 5.3 points per 100 possessions. But take either of them off the court, and they've been outscored by a lot. So they need another scoring punch. I think Fournier can provide that. I don't have too many notes here. The funny thing was, I don't know if you saw the Twitter exchange, but Fournier, I don't know what exactly happened, but he told the people to go look up his last name if they don't know who he is or aren't familiar with him. And reporters were like, no, don't look up his last name because it's something that, it stands for something that's not particularly appropriate to be mentioned on this podcast. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, I think it helps the Celtics. And the Magic, you get 2 second-round picks. Nothing too great, but I mean, think about it. You turned Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Vucevic into what? You got R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, Wendell Carter Jr. You got 2 very good young players. You got some veterans. You got picks. Isn't that what you wanted? Yeah, the Magic were very active. Probably the most active of any team by far at the deadline. So good for them for ripping off the Band-Aid and starting a rebuild. And then the Celtics are an interesting team. We'll have to talk about them more in a future podcast because right now there's 2 games below 500. So they're significantly underachieving right now with the roster that they have.
Right, and they're reported to be able to get Andre Drummond. They just finalized that buyout. The Cavs did, so they're one of the front runners to get him. So that'll be interesting to see also.
Yep. Okay. I want to get your opinion on this. Well, actually, before we do the Mavs trade, I want to talk about the Rajon Rondo trade. To who was it? He got traded to the Clippers.
Right. For Lou Williams.
Yes. And 2 future second-round picks. So why don't you talk about that for a minute?
Well, I think the Clippers are just taking a flyer on Rondo. I think they'd be smart to just sit him until the playoffs and just play him in the playoffs. That's when he's at his best anyway, and you don't want to just risk him getting hurt or anything like that. He's not going to do you any good playing him in the regular season. But as for what this move does for them, it just gives them a playmaker. They just needed a guy that can run the offense. Um, we saw what happened last year when you asked Kawhi and PG to be able to just go out there and run the offense through them, and it didn't really work. Those are wing guys; they're not playmakers necessarily. Obviously, they're not awful playmakers. They're pretty good with playmaking, but they're not fit to run the point guard role. So Rajon Rondo can do that. And in the playoffs, they're just hoping for that Lakers version of Rajon Rondo last year. And he hasn't been that guy so far this year, but we've seen this before over and over. Playoff Rondo is a real thing. So if we get to the playoffs and he starts playing good, I will not be surprised in the slightest. And then the Hawks, you're getting 2 picks for Rondo. Um, that's really more than you could have hoped, given his age and given his current play at the moment. And then Lou Williams, I don't know if he's even going to play for them because reports came out that he was actually considering retirement. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not super high on this deal for the Clippers. I think they
Yeah.
could have done they could have and should have done better than this. But hey,
Right.
they're betting big on the phenomenon of playoff Rondo, who showed up and showed out in last year's playoffs and played a big role in that Lakers championship. But yeah, I think Kawhi Leonard and a bunch of other Clippers players have lamented at times at the Clippers' lack of playmaking. And they're right. I mean, they ranked 24th in percentage of their field goals assisted on at 58%. So there's not a whole lot of, I guess playmaking, passing. I don't know. But maybe it's overrated because the Utah Jazz actually are behind them in that category. I don't, But the question is whether Rondo is the right player to fill that playmaking void, and I'm not sure he is. Right now, this season is one of the worst performances of his career in terms of his per 36-minute numbers. His 9.5 points per 36 minutes is a career low, and his 8.5 assists per 36 minutes is his fewest since 2007-2008, according to ESPN. But hey, if he's able to do what he did in last year's playoffs, make enough threes, he's actually shooting 38% on limited attempts, but still 38%. If he's able to make enough outside shots and give effort and be a positive contributor on defense, this could be a win for the Clippers. But I don't think we're going to know until May and when the playoffs, early May and when the playoffs start.
Right.
As far as the Hawks, I like it. I do believe it was reported that he is going to play for the Hawks for at least the remainder of this season. I don't know what he'll do after that. And I think that's good. I think he's an upgrade. He's definitely an upgrade in terms of scoring. They do need some scoring off the bench. And he gives them that. And then the picks, yeah, they got two second round picks and cash for a veteran 35-year-old, some would say washed up player in Rajon Rondo. I think the Hawks did a good job. I'm not so high on it for the Clippers. I'd give it like a C+, but we'll just have to see what Rondo turns into. If he can be the same player that posted 13 points per game and 9.6 assists for 36 minutes while making 40% of his threes in last year's playoffs. So we'll see.
Right. And also another factor of this is what he brings off the court as well. He's a leader.
Right.
Paul George and Kawhi are known to be not very vocal. So in the locker room, Rajon Rondo is going to come in and just be someone who's a veteran and just a vocal leader in the sense. So
No
that
question
could help
about it.
them as well.
No question. Okay. So I don't have much else to say on this, but I want to get your thoughts on the Mavericks trade.
Right.
They made a deal. They received JJ Redick and Nico Melli from the Pelicans, and they receive James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, I believe is how you say his name, and a 2021 second-round pick. The Pelicans did. So, what do you think as a Mavs fan?
I like it. I like it a lot. These are two players that aren't even rotational players anymore, in my opinion. James Johnson, say what you want about some of the stuff he does as a playmaker. Like, he was good at times this year, but he's not consistent enough to be a viable part of our rotation. And I think we get an upgrade there in Nico Melli, that he's an underrated part of this deal. I really like that we got Nico Melli out of it as well. He's a really good shooter. And then Wes Iwundu was another guy who he struggled shooting the three this year. And he's a solid defender. And some people are still have a belief that he can be a solid player. So for the Pelicans, he's a guy who maybe can turn into something for you, because he already plays good defense. And we saw what the shooting coaches in New Orleans were able to do with Lonzo Ball. So if they can work their magic on Wes Iwundu, then great, and if not, then it's a salary dump and you're going to be under the tax with this deal. That's an underrated part of the deal as well. They're going to dodge the luxury tax and skirt under it. So that's good for them. And then getting back to the Mavericks, I haven't even talked about JJ Redick yet. Even if he doesn't play, like, I still think it's a win for the Mavericks, just from the fact that he's such a good veteran leader, when we've been missing that all year. It feels like we have a really young team, and I think Boban and JJ are only players over 30 now. So JJ is going to go in that locker room, and I think the possibility of him helping other guys with their shooting, and also just with their routines, and just being disciplined with their work ethic. He's one of the best guys in terms of work ethic in the entire league. So I think this is a win. Whether he's good on the court or not, I think it's still a win. So
I think it's a win too. JJ Redick, since he was temporarily removed from the rotation in late January, I believe he had some injuries as well. Since he's come back, he's shooting 46% on his threes in February and March. So he started slow, but now he's hitting his stride. As long as he stays healthy, this gives the Mavericks two really good shooters, and that's what you need in today's NBA. And now they can mix and match, Melli and Redick with Hardaway and Finney Smith, depending on the matchups. Yeah, I think it's good. Shooting was a need for them. So the Pelicans, I don't make too much of it, other than they got what they could for these two players. James Johnson could be a nice piece. I don't know much about Wes Iwundu. And the second round pick is nice, but the bigger name was Lonzo Ball, but they decided to keep him, which was interesting. I believe Lonzo told them that he wanted to stay, which is interesting. But we can get into that another day. But I think that wraps up this segment, unless you have something else you want to say on the Norman Powell.
Right. And before we move on from the Mavericks deal, I just want to say, even if he sucks, even if JJ Redick sucks on the court, I am so excited for the content that's going to come out on the JJ Redick podcast, dude. He could get Luca on the show, KP on the show, Jalen Brunson on the show. So like that was like one of the first things I thought about when they made this deal. I'm not joking. Like that was one of the first things I thought about. So because I listen to that podcast a lot, so I know that's completely unrelated, but yeah, I will give just a short synopsis of that Gary Trent trade because I think it's really interesting. I think it's actually one of those trades that I don't think is a win-win. I think it's a win for the Raptors, but I don't know if I like it if I'm the Blazers because Gary Trent is someone who is uh, 21, 22 years old, somewhere in that range. He's young and he has upside. He's already such a good shooter. And I think he will be as good, if not better, than Norman Powell is as early as next year. So the upside that you're getting from this, it's all about win now. So unless they truly believe that this move will move the needle and get them to the finals, then this is not a deal that I'm a fan of. So, and I don't think this does it. I'm a big fan of Norman Powell. He's been playing amazing this year. Career high efficiency, 19 points per game. Um, he's an underrated scorer, honestly. But I just don't know if it moves the needle enough. It's a lot of the same questions I had with the Nuggets, but I see this move as more of a lateral move in a vacuum for an older player as well, both on expiring deals, and they don't have the rights to him in free agency, so he can just walk if he wants to leave. And we had Trent in restricted free agency, so I don't like that move for the Blazers.
Interesting. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts, but I think that's an interesting take. But with that, that's going to wrap up our second segment of this extremely long podcast.
Right.
That's okay. There's so much content right now. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to kick off our NFL draft content.
Right. And if you're watching the video, like we said at the beginning, leave a like and subscribe. And hopefully stay tuned for the other content we're bringing out because we'll have the and the NFL draft stuff in this next segment. So if you're listening to the full episode, we'll see you on the other side and peace out.